Hi, I'm here with Lionel Barber, the editor of the FT, and we're here to talk about the next chairman of the Fed. Clearly the most important job in the United States is the president, but close second would be the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and that's really what the buzz is at the moment in Washington, D.C. Lionel, what do you think's going to happen?
Well, let me just say that the Fed chairman at the moment, Ben Bernanke, has just been presiding over the most important years of monetary policy and economic policy in America since the Great Depression. And so the question is, who is big enough to fill his shoes? Because it's generally regarded that he's done a very good job.
Ideally, he'd get a third term, wouldn't he? That would be most people's vote.
You have to ask whether he's just exhausted. I mean, this has been a 12 to 12, 24-hour-7 job, but he seems as though he's unlikely to want that. And they're already talking about candidates. Now, the principal two candidates are Janet Yellen, San Francisco Fed Vice Chair, and Larry Summers, the former Treasury Secretary under President Clinton, Chief Economist of the World Bank, head of the economic advisors at the White House through the financial crisis, and now looking to add to a glittering resume.
Now, between the two of them, philosophically, there's not much difference. Both support broadly what Ben Bernanke's done in the last 8 years, particularly last 3 years. Why do you think there's such skittishness in the markets about which of these two, if indeed it is the shortlist, these two, it's going to be?
Well, independent of the personalities, and Larry Summers is famously abrasive, although a brilliant intellect, and Janet Yellen is a strong intellect yourself. And as you say, they're likely to pursue unconventional monetary policy. But the big issue is at what point do those unconventional policies, quantitative easing, etc., stop, and at what point does the interest rate cycle change? And the question then is, who's likely to manage that best? Who's going to read the economy best? And that's what I think the markets are worried about.
And now some people would say that Larry Summers doesn't have the diplomatic skills to manage, what is a collection of egos. This might not be mediating the Arab-Israeli dispute, but this diplomatic skills are still required. Do you think that those many, many people who've been criticizing the possibility of a Summers nomination are overstating his lack of diplomatic credentials?
Well, the chairman of the Fed has to be very careful in how he appears before Congress. That of course is something he's done before with the Treasury Secretary. But yes, he has to manage the presidents of the various regional Federal Reserves, and that does require some political touch, deftness of touch, a little bit of perhaps self-abasement occasionally. That's not something that Larry Summers is particularly good at. On the other hand, the most important quality is having a brilliant economic mind and a reading of the economy.
And arguably somebody who's been at the coalface of every single major financial crisis.
Yeah, Larry Summers has gone through the tequila crisis, emerging market crisis in Latin America. He went through the financial crisis, Russia, South Korea, Indonesia, famously arguing for bailouts of the IMF in the late 1990s, and now, of course, the global financial crisis.
Post Lehman Brothers. I mean, if you had to make a prediction, knowing, I guess this might be a leading question, but knowing, that Obama tends to go for people he knows, and he does know Larry Summers quite a lot better than Yellen, even though credentials are equally good. Who would you, I mean, this is a leading question, but who would you predict that he would nominate?
Well, it is difficult to read, but there are two words which I associate President Obama with, which is comfort level. And if you look at the picks that he's made in his second term, like Jack Lew for Treasury Secretary, Susan Rice, he wanted to make her Secretary of State, didn't work out that way, so he's made a National Security Advisor, famously close to her. You'd have to say, with comfort level, he knows Larry Summers, he's worked with Larry Summers, he knows how he walks and talks. That would be the choice. But of course, he also knows that there's some congressional opposition. That may not deter him, but it'll be a consideration.
So if we were betting people, which we aren't, we'd say narrowly Summers gets the nomination, but Summers also gets a much more difficult confirmation process.
I think Summers is the front runner, not by much, but he's the front runner. The issue that I would think everybody should focus on is the fact that the reason for the opposition is not just because he's abrasive, it's because he's associated with the wave of liberalization of the financial services sector in the 1990s, Gramm-Leach, Bliley, etc., which was seen as sowing the seeds of the global financial crisis. And the Democrats, and remember Barack Obama is a Democrat, the Democrats on the Hill are not going to let Larry Summers forget that.
Thank you, Lionel.
Thanks, Ed.